I'm Frank Bing, puffing out smoke.
I'm Ben Cowan.
Well, I'm trying to sort of figure out, when you mentioned that before, when it was, but essentially sort of put together we just kind of got together with some people and played. This is probably like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and then it was with a tuba player called Lauren Marshall and a bass player called Nico Gross, and me and a guitarist called Lucas Suarez, and we just started playing. I think we did one gig together, and then sporadically sort of from then until about, I don't know, 2006 or something. Yes. It was very sporadic, kind of, you know, studio sessions or a couple of live dates, and so really I think I'm the only person that's still in the band now, the current lineup from that point. But, so that was really where it started, and so came up with a name because we had a gig, you know, we did the gig, and then everyone was sort of very busy, and you know, it just became a sort of a name really to cover a certain kind of activity, improvised activity within the label and all sorts of stuff like that. I can't remember when you first played.
I did a gig in '96.
Was it '96?
Yeah.
God, showing our
With
age.
Lucas, Frank and Nico. Yeah, I knew Frank from that really, but we didn't play till 2005. We've done a few things, but 2005 was the new condensed Snorkel.
It's when we really started treating it as a
Yeah.
ongoing concern, which then led to the first album, which was 2008.
And that was basically me, Frank, Jeremy, Charles, who also does stuff with Frank, or did stuff with Frank at that point on Frank's label, and Tom, trombone player, so trombone at that point, and that's kind of been the core of it. But we've had now 2 people come in since then, Charles and Jeremy, are not with the band, so it's kind of similar, you know, instrumentation, but slight modifications.
And there are a few people that sort of were involved who still get involved on the studio front, and there are gigs where we can't do the full 5-piece. So sometimes we do it as a 4-piece, and sometimes a 6-piece. So, you know, it's partly practical as well.
Yeah.
Just who's around to do certain. I always tend to think of Snorkel as its kind of own kind of organism, you know, as it has its own rules, which everyone who plays within it adhere to a certain degree, you know, or the people that obviously we want to get involved and who we feel it works with, that understand what that's about. Well, I just, you know, I'm just a huge fan of music, and we set it up because I was in another group called Charlie Marlowe at the time. We wanted to release an EP, which we could then use to try and get another deal, and we released the EP, and that was in 2001, and then it sort of lay dormant for a couple of years. So it's slow by name, slow by nature, really. It kind of it's just built up over time. But I always wanted to. I always loved the idea of releasing music and curating stuff to a certain extent. Yeah, that's where it started. And then Orrin Marshall, we released an album with great tuba player Orrin Marshall, and that was sort of the second and third album. And it's just sort of slowly built up from there. Yeah, well, we kind of the press release that went out for this, which has been slightly it's been picked up on as perhaps slightly wordy, but we kind of just jumbled a whole lot of genres together because it is really hard to say what we do. I mean, the core of what we do is improvise, and it's a certain sort of idea about instrumentation and how you plug into something that's picking up on electronic music, but also live stuff, instrumental music. So I mean, it does pick up on all sorts of stuff like jazz, and the rhythms that we pick up on are jazz and African and funk kind of inspired. But then there's the use of electronics and cheap drum machines, and so it really kind of pulls in a lot of different stuff. In terms of working method, I would say, we always get quoted as, Can, groups like Can and Soft Machine are definitely big influences for me. And I don't think we sound like them, but I think there's something about the methods we employ, which is to say you improvise, and then in the studio we kind of then work stuff, sort of editing process, which
kind of mesh it.
Yeah, which kind of just brings it all together, but also takes it in different directions at times. So in a way, although the studio process is often much longer, it's still that same kind of process, isn't it? It's still that kind of, you're reacting to what's there, and you're letting that guide you rather than trying to impose some kind of songwriting strategy on it, or
we do write things occasionally and have set things, but they usually have things to be played from improvising and just say,
that sounds good.
Yeah, it's more like, we like occasionally to play a set tune, but it comes out of an improvisation, and we never sort of go, this is exactly what it is, but there's always a bit of leeway.
Yeah.
But it's much more a refreshing change than just improvising, but it's not something that we think of, say, of setting, even though it is set. Or doesn't feel like that anyway. But it's, with improvising, it's like we do a bit of dub and jazz, but it's not like we're doing standards where somebody takes a solo over set chords, or everything's dubbed like an old roots record. It's just the process of doing it, reacting and listening to what we do, I suppose.
I think the dub thing is almost more kind of what happens in the studio, because it's that idea of stripping things out and revealing something underneath, that's more interesting. And live, yes, we use the classic sort of dub tools, the echoes and the shifting reverb spaces, but it's I think more about the studio, isn't it? The dub it's like somehow you're presented with what you've done, and you kind of go, well, if you take that thing out, what's underneath it? Is that maybe more interesting and more minimal?
A very mysterious X Factor process that you don't want to know about.
Don't use the word X Factor.
Well, in the traditional sense of the word, not the bastardised version of it. I think one of the things maybe you're nodding at is that we have a sense that because of, I don't know if it's the instrumentation or because there's a lot of overlap with our sounds, and sometimes one of the nice things about Snorkel is that we're improvising and listening as well, and there's a different space you inhabit when you sense that all that is in an immersive state and you're all in it together. And because of our instruments overlapping and doing similar things, sometimes it's not easy to know who's playing what.
It's a sound engineer's nightmare, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because they have no idea who's making
Where's
what
the bass
sounds,
coming
apart
from?
the kit maybe. But.
Yeah, Frank plays sounds that's similar to mine, and I play percussive sounds. Rav plays drum machine sounds that go with the kit, and in that sense, there's a lot of syncopation within that, so the layering comes just from the fact that somebody else is doing something physically with certain sounds that someone else is doing at the same time. But yeah, just I think improvising, because you're not repeating something, you're making something on the spot. You're not so conscious of it, knowing where it fits. Sometimes it can get messy, and sometimes you just by surprise you're doing that, but you're not.
Well, it's the thrill of it, isn't it?
The
thrill of it is that it can totally fuck up and it can be horrible. But and for me, I think sometimes what I think musically were the best gigs are often the ones that, in terms of sort of audience, how much of an audience there is, and the buzz of a gig, if you see what I mean. Sometimes there's an anomaly there, because I think for us to sort of be able to listen and really tune into what we're doing, sometimes it's better not to have a noisy crowd, But
yeah.
So I think some of the gigs that have felt most exciting are actually when you listen back to or think back to it, probably not very good musically, in some kind of way. But and we do try, and we have a sort of a very limited repertoire of stuff that we call upon, tracks like Stop Machine, the first one on the album. We've been playing that live quite a lot, so we have sort of some sense of structure that we can throw into a set if we feel we need to, or
Cool.
I feel that we're quite confident with each other, and we know that the reward is so good that you're willing to jump in the deep end, and because your nervous system kind of on red alert, there's the joy of actually releasing that and doing something. But the problem is when it's like when you try it and you just, oh no, it hasn't happened, or when you're trying it all together to shift somewhere and you're sort of noodling around and you sort of feel this ship is really being steered in the wrong direction. So then it's like stand-up comedy where you're just getting heckled or something. You feel like
have you been
small. Well, the equivalent of it. Well, nobody claps. That's the equivalent. But then that's scary. But that's more like you accept that as part of the process.
Part and parcel with the whole.
Yeah,
process.
It's weird. I've only felt conscious like that when it's certain venues. We played this one place in Hackney. It was a theatre. Maybe it was just the gig it was, but everyone was sort of seated, quite stern and sort of very formal, and we just felt like we were just being watched, like we had to be really conscious of what we were doing. I don't know, rather than being immersed in something. But I don't necessarily think it's hugely about we can't be on stage or anything, but there was a feeling of coldness within that, and but that
I think also, which is true of all improvised music, if you're talking about free improvised stuff, there's a sense that you're trying to adapt to the space and the audience, and so if it is and we have played in, we've played at festivals, but we've also played in art galleries, and there's a, I think, part of the thing you try and do is adapt to that space and adapt to the acoustics of the space as well.
Kind of audience.
Yeah, well, the audience and the acoustic of the space is really important as well, because and it's a bizarre thing, but when we actually play the material that is slightly more rehearsed, because it's rehearsed and therefore it's more fixed, it's less adaptive to the audience and the space, and that can, I find sometimes those moments are actually the least rewarding.
Right.
It's the moments when
They're confining.
Yeah, there's only a, you can't.
You're imposing what you think previously would work, and when it doesn't.
So your brain's fundamentally in a slightly different place. You're using recall as opposed to
Constructing.
as opposed to just having to use your ears and listen and your brain to react. And
Sure.
yeah, I don't know if that doesn't sound too pretentious, but